IVM.
Welcome to Think Fast, where I'm in an unusual location this week, but this is a podcast where we talk about all things business, startups, tech, creator economy, and random dad jokes between me and Suchita. I am in my hometown this week, and so audio, if it's off, people, and to Suchita, I'm just saying apologies beforehand. This lovely mic I'm talking on has been stacked on a stack of CDs, which I will talk about midway through this episode. What's been up with you?
You're promising to send me any Lucky Ali CD that you may have, because I'm a Lucky Ali stan. So what's been happening, Varun? Our first week of Jan, and everything
much action
has happened. Dude, one, Omicron is like the action I never wanted.
Yeah.
So please go away, COVID. I feel like we're back to the first wave because everyone is working from home. Did you see what Australia did? Djokovic not allowed to enter. Yeah, well done, man. Yeah, no celebrities are crossing this fine line. But getting into, all things startups and funding, because investments seem to be all the rage still. Just a quick rundown of what's gone down just this week, guys. This has happened literally in the past 5 days. Exotel has raised a massive Series D. ID Fresh has raised 507 crores, giving one of their early investors, Helion, a 10x return on their investments. B2B manufacturing services marketplace, which is something we spoke about in our e-commerce episodes network, they've raised about $210 million. Most importantly, your and my, one of our favorite companies, Dunzo, been semi-acquired or like majority stake acquired or whatever is going on. Not majority, because Reliance I think has got about a 25.8 percent stake in Dunzo, but they're investing $200 million in the company, and it seems like the focus for Dunzo over time will become this hot segment of quick commerce, which FYI we've been talking about for a while. There's this company called Genie Mode, which has brought InfoEdge back into action. There's another company called Creator Club, which is in this interactive live streaming space that's also raised money. Udaan has been raising money. By the way, Neeraj Chopra has apparently become an angel investor, the athlete who won the gold medal.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Everybody's an angel investor now. That's actually the most interesting part right now in the space.
Except me. How are people getting the money to angel invest? I do not understand this.
So here's the thing, right? Without going too deep into it, I feel that most times how a lot of startups are looking at it is saying, are you strategically bringing someone on? Because the name will get you news, and obviously that's going to help from a publicity standpoint. So I'm guessing a lot of these ticket sizes aren't very large, because from what I've seen, strategic ones especially aren't very large. And I don't know how much, if he's putting a larger amount, that's good for him. I'm happy to see other athletes beyond cricket doing this.
Yep. And motivation, hopefully, for many, many more folks to jump on one, athletics as a future prospectus, and second, that is becoming lucrative, exactly like you said, right? Outside of cricket is excellent. Funding aside, because let's be honest, raising money isn't a guarantor of shit. There's been a lot of excitement on the ESOP buyback front, which is again something we spoke about earlier. So ESOP buyback in India in 2021 was to the tune of 435 million, and literally just a year before it was about an eighth of the amount, where in 2020 the ESOP buyback was just about 50 million. And in the middle of all of this, Ninja Kart announced 100 crore ESOP buyback. So a lot of excitement happening, even in the ESOP buyback front. And two other quick pieces of news, one of which we'll talk about later. Amar Nagaram, who's the ex-CEO of Myntra, has raised money to launch his own Shein-ish, competitive type platform, which we'll get into a little later. But before that, woohoo to women in business. Alka Mittal has been appointed the interim chairman and managing director of ONGC. She's the first woman to head the country's largest oil and gas producer, replacing Subhash Kumar, another interim head who retired after reaching superannuation age on December 31. Thank you, Jalasmi, our excellent producer. What's been on your radar?
As I always update on all things GoodGlamm Group, Good Creator Co. It's an interesting merging of multiple units. I mean, at some point, this is what happens, right? You obviously acquire a bunch of companies, you bring in more, and GoodGlamm is now putting them under clusters. So I'm guessing this Good Creator Co. piece should be interesting just to see how they use it. But more importantly, in my head, is like how they bring it all together, because you have 4 leads of 4 different companies, all co-founders.
Yep.
And the problem with that is who's running that part. We would hope it will work out in the best way. but still something to look at and say, how is this going to work? There's a lot happening there. Also, what's been interesting is I realize that I'm a major noob when it comes to Web3 and everybody seems to be talking about it. I've had major FOMO for a while about it. So I'm trying to get into the space a little bit and understand it. One of the most interesting examples I actually found was this new DAO that's come out called Blockbuster DAO, where they're actually raising about $5 million and they're buying Blockbuster, the brand. They're almost looking at how can you decentralize the streaming film studio business, right? Where you can you almost operate a Netflix, but where users can vote about which movies get funding to be made and which ones don't. I think that's a really interesting one to kind of pick and look at, because it kind of shows a real world example of something that is taking old school to Web3 and showing how that kind of translate here. So I'm finding that super interesting. And drum roll please. My most exciting news of the week. Ding, 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 ding. Apple touched 3 trillion. What is a trillion? What is 3 trillion?
You go Tim Cook.
Yes.
You go Tim Cook.
It's crazy. Just the amount of growth that's seen, and there's a lot that's happened there. Right? Ever since he took over from Steve Jobs, and he's kind of really scaled it up from an operational standpoint. But it's also generated the best retweet of the week. All-time favorite tweeters. Is Twitter a word? All-time favorite tweeters. Devaya Bopana actually retweeted something because so when Tim Cook took over, Apple's market cap was 340 billion. Today, 3 trillion.
Wow. In a decade.
He's worth 1.5 billion. So Trunk fan tweeted this saying, see, the lesson here is that you don't get rich by being an employee. And he was being sarcastic, of course. Devaya retweets it and he's like, screw you, I want to be this employee and forever remain poor at 1.5 billion. I think I want to be the employee too. 1.5 billion. It's not a bad number to have.
Insane. And
yes.
I mean, yeah, this is like not even including, I don't know how this calculus of 1.5 billion came together, but I'm assuming he's one, heavily paid. Second, like definitely has shares in the company.
Has a lot of shares, I'm guessing.
And also he's been there for a while.
Yeah.
He would be hitting 2 decades, close to 2 decades at Apple.
So the funny part is, I actually read this interesting piece of trivia, is that when Steve Jobs was trying to hire Tim Cook way back in the day, and Tim Cook was at Compaq, many people told him that he should not leave Compaq because Compaq was doing really well and Apple was down in the dumps. And people don't know, no, this is like a thriving business. Please stay at Compaq. Don't go to Apple. Their good days are behind them. But he made that move. Imagine if he'd stayed at Compaq.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I want to call out to over here is, I remember when he was appointed CEO, there was so much criticism about him not being enough of a visionary and only being an operations guy. But I think this goes back to, fundamentals of business and also jobs to be done, right? The most important thing for a company like Apple is to have, think of what's happened in the past 2 years and with supply chain being all over the place. Peloton's lost a lot of market share and has lost a lot of their valuation because of not being able to meet timelines and deadlines. But that, a company like Apple is so well entrenched in all parts of manufacturing, despite everything that's gone down. They managed to meet every deadline, launch new products. That is operational excellence. And that is why, my friends, Tim Cook is worth 1.5
And also for anybody who says he hasn't, there's been no innovation. The AirPods are a $15 billion business. That's 15 billion. It's more than most of the largest companies you kind of always talk about. So I guess we aren't looking at it in that sense. I think people just want a Steve Jobs on stage. I don't blame them. I always love to see Steve Jobs on stage. But this is one of those things you can turn around and say, okay, amazing to see someone like really kind of grow a piece like that. But before I start fanboying any further, considering I'm a hardcore Apple fanboy, I think we need to go for a break and we'll be right back with a Think Fast segment where we will think fast and obviously not talk longer like we have about Apple right now. And be right back with Think Fast.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're in the Think Fast segment. We still haven't figured a way to make sure we go from Think Fast to Think Fast segment. But for people who are joining it right now, we're going to throw a bunch of things at each other and we will respond to it. That did not sound right, but we will just go with the flow on this one. Suchita, I'm going to start off with the first one, sir. And then you can follow it after that. Let's go. What is your take on Blackberry dying? RIP Blackberry.
Oh man, that this happened on the same day that Apple's 3 trillion valuation happened is like, whoa, karma, growth, what else? I don't know, man. I was a big Blackberry stan and I am waiting for that QWERTY thingamajig to come back. Yeah. I miss my BB pin days, Guzre Ve Zamane, where all of those things matter. But I think Blackberry, Nokia, so many of these examples of what happens when you don't disrupt yourself. So Blackberry dying sucks for them, but I do hope QWERTY makes a comeback. Okay, my question for you. We obviously didn't speak about this in the intro because I wanted to drop this bomb right now. Mr. Ashneer Grover from Bharat Pay has had quite a week.
Yes.
What is your take on all the very many avatars of Shark Tank plus, allegedly Kotak Bank employee abuser Ashneer Grover?
Oh, I heard that audio clip. It's not a good look, is it?
That was not nice.
Here's the thing. I think someone actually pointed this out on Twitter. I thought it's an interesting insight. Where they actually said that if you look at all the Shark Tank judges here versus anywhere in the world, everybody else has actually been an investor for a long time. Versus if you look at all these guys, they're actually still running businesses which aren't profitable in a large sense. So that's an interesting thing to look at. But I just feel that he's been the only one I have not liked on the show because I just felt that he gets too touchy about everything. And I don't know why he's trying to be Raghu from Roadies. And just like point to side note, Raghu from Roadies, who was my first boss, is actually one of the nicest people you'll meet off camera. So,
who would have thought?
This guy just generally, I think, is the way he is. And if you say some shit like this, it comes right back on your face, I'm guessing. But it's going to be interesting to see how Bharat Pay recovers from this because, the problem with founder-led and founder-faced companies is that when that founder has a lot of these things, it kind of rubs off onto the business. So maybe they need to kind of relook at how that perception is kind of built now.
Yeah, not a good week for him at all.
Yes. On to my next question, which is something which I saw you kind of tweet about, which is that lovely Jeff Bezos photo collage that went out where he's looking like a CharaghDin uncle. So what's your take on that?
Oh my God, that picture hurt my eyes. For the longest time, I didn't realize it was him. So ladies and gents, in case you haven't seen this already, just make a quick Google search of Jeff Bezos' photo where he's canoodling with his new wife or whatever situation he has with Lauren Sanchez. I haven't been following Jeff Bezos on Instagram ever, but it's just such a... I mean, I don't know if I want to say refreshing in a positive or a negative context, but your idea of Jeff Bezos is this very focused, dedicated man who's all about his work and, priority 1, priority 2 and very a hectic uncle, right? That's how you think of Jeff Bezos. And literally he's transformed into, I don't know, Chhatarpur, landlord with his it's just weird.
Yeah.
It's just, it's jarring and his face has got all of this work done. He looks very injected and but in any case, keeping Jeff Bezos and his midlife crisis aside, I had told you about this really cool / weird / interesting new initiative or whatever called CPG House. So dear listeners, CPG House is basically Hype House, which Varun spoke to us about last week, where a bunch of CPG founders are apparently co-living, co-working, co-staying or whatever in a house. And it's apparently supposed to be this experience where you get to exchange ideas. It sounds a little bit like Y Combinator without the money. So CPG House founders coming together, living under the same roof. What is your think fast?
But is it a reality show is my question to you.
It's not a reality show yet.
But I don't know. It's interesting. I think there's always something which comes out when you have a bunch of people live together in one space, kind of hang out and then they can kind of jam on ideas. So I think it's interesting. I think it would actually be more interesting if you mixed it up with all the different players across CBG space. So you have people who work on logistics, people who work on product. And if you actually had that, you would actually come out with more products. But it's interesting. We should do this. Get people in the house and figure out what happens. Worst case, they might birth a CBG product. My dad joke for the day is done.
I think you have a...
That silence was my dad joke of the day getting done.
Ignoring that. Yes, but do you have a question for me?
Yes. There's this interesting game called Wordle. It was a game made by a Brooklyn man for his Gujarati partner. And it's become this rage in terms of a game. You and I were talking about it a little earlier. So what do you think about it?
What is this game about? How is it played? And why is it all over my Twitter? I've just seen it explode on my Twitter feed today.
He made this game so they could kind of play it together. It was not meant to be public, where basically you have a bunch of letters around and you make a word. You have to just make sure you guess the right sequence of letters to come up with the word. every day there's one word that comes up. It was a game they played together. They had a lot of fun doing it. So he then opened it up, and he's a programmer coder, right? So he created himself. They opened it up to family, and it was on their like the family group and stuff like that. Even they all enjoyed it. He put it out there. Now it's got, I think, last count some 300,000 downloads, and it's gone around.
Wow.
It's also because it was built for personal usage. It doesn't have your standard ads popping up or asking you to do more things. It's so simple and standard that it's fun. So simple, yet yes. Simple and fun game, which people can enjoy. Very different, but also it's a trend, right? You're seeing enough people who've gone back to crosswords and everything else in recent times. So yes, that is the context of the game. But what do you think about it?
I think sounds cool, man. I'm definitely going to give this Wordle game a shot. I used to be like a Scrabble junkie and I thoroughly enjoyed like Sudoku and all of these exercises. But it's good to see Twitter, propagate something constructive. Yeah. Speaking of constructive, our battle of quick commerce seems to be getting even more heated up. Ladies and gents, I alluded to this earlier, but our friends at Dunzo have picked up a check from none other than Big Daddy of Commerce, Reliance. Space is heating up. Who's going to win, Varun? Who is going to win?
The guys who can actually look at this from a long-term perspective and actually cash roll it till it actually hits some form of, getting positive in terms of numbers are the ones who'll be able to survive. And here these guys have got Reliance in. So it's going to be interesting to see. The ones who don't have that backing of a strong retail giant are the ones who are going to struggle. So it's a great move for Dunzo. They got like solid backing here. We obviously have, I keep forgetting what Grofers is now called because they've changed their name and logo so many times.
Blinkit.
Yes. Blinkit. So even for them, it's going to be interesting to see how they match up to this. Everybody's got their guns out, ammunition ready. But what about our Stanford boys? They got to figure out someone to get in as well to kind of take this ahead.
Stanford boys apparently got an offer for a buyout. I think I saw that somewhere on Twitter. But I mean, koshish jari hai, I guess, at their end. I also think this is a smart move for Dunzo because honestly, in between Zomato's, pretty kick-ass IPO, in between Swiggy having the amount of dry powder that they have, you're kind of getting backed against a wall, right? And we had discussed this earlier, but the construct of quick commerce is very different from what Dunzo's current business is, which is, three-sided marketplace. The construct of quick commerce is pick and drop. And for them to even build out this capability would require, going exponentially faster on the warehousing capabilities, on the manufacturer contacts, this, that, and the other, which, of course, you don't need to really have anymore if you've got Reliance sort of backing you. So good move for Dunzo, man. Good time, good opportunity, and good home.
Our lightning researcher, producer, Jalasmi has just dropped in the chat notes that Swiggy and Zomato are trying to buy Zepto.
Interesting. I don't know why Zomato would want to buy Zepto if they've already got, Blinkit, but I guess this is one of those kill the competition before it can kill you.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the whole thing. And have we done a Think Fast? We have thought very fast today in the Think Fast segment. I'm very proud of us. We have been efficient. We are getting better with age.
Congratulations.
We only one dad joke.
You're aging well. You're aging well. Ladies and
gents, I had technically a good one because I called him a CharaghDin uncle.
I just want to
remind
you that Varun is turning 40 in 7 months. I'm going to make this like a thing on our podcast.
7.5 months. 7.5 months. My topless photos, my midlife crisis topless photos have not arrived yet.
They're going to come soon. Can't wait for you to pose Jeff
with
Bezos.
Body oil.
Yes. But now it's time for a quick break, ladies and gents. We will take that break and be back with our short segment where Varun and I will give you our quick sort of like semi-shallow dives into 2 to 3 topics that we've identified for you. So we'll be back with that in just a bit.
A wise man once said, traveling, it makes you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller.
Well, listen to such travel stories and experiences exploring India on the Musafir Stories with us, Saif and Faiza.
Catch us on the IVM website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Okay, ladies and gents, we are back with our shortcuts segment where we'll cover noteworthy news and general updates from all things creator economy, startup, business, blah, 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 blah. Varun, you're going to kick us off with my favorite topic of all time, which is...
alcohol.
Yes.
The Indian alcohol space has been interesting, right? It's been, especially over the last 2 years, they've obviously not had the best time with lockdowns because where they would traditionally get money from, which was like people going to, let's say, a wine shop and buying stuff or going out to, let's say, a bar or a restaurant, all that kind of went down. So they had to really reinvent a bunch of things. But what that also did was it created an opportunity to kind of reinvent the business. And that's really been happening a lot. You've seen people go from, let's say, I'm going to build a brewery in the beer business, we're saying, okay, I'll have like almost like stations where you can come and like kind of pick up or get stuff home delivered. There's obviously a lot of push for e-com to be allowed because I think that will really change the game for most of them. But it's been an interesting time for the entire segment. Also, what's been interesting is the number of new players. And really, I think the way the consumers change, that's been the most interesting thing to see across this. I have a bunch of data here, but I just want to get like a top level thought from you.
I think, obviously the big sort of wave of all things local alcohol came thanks to Bira, right? So I have to give credit where it's due. I mean, Kingfisher, yes, 100%. But, then Bira really came and disrupted the idea of what, locally branded, not necessarily locally made alcohol could be like. And we saw a gin revolution in like 2018, 2019, where you had greater than launch and after greater than, like literally every second month, there was a new...
Sons and a bunch of others.
Exactly. There's literally a new gin brand coming up every second week. And of course, now you're seeing really interesting rum brands. There's this newly launched brand called Makazai, which is divine, a super easy, smooth rum. There's tequila, which is coming up. There was Desmond G, which is a pretty decent...
My favorite part.
Oh, tequila, same here. Oh my God, one more thing in common.
Tequila drinkers on this podcast.
And there's, more agave than tequila. And now there's Pistola, which is also an agave brand. Again, all really coming out of Goa. So I think what's interesting is like Goa seems to have become this, sort of like hotbed of all the cool new Alco-Bev brands and Alco-Bev startups. But, to the point that you made, obviously at-home consumption is one, but two other trends that are significantly creating a change over here is alcohol has become more like recreational versus, requiring an occasion. So, and I'm not saying this has happened at scale yet, but that's where the trends seem to be going, right? So alcohol isn't just anymore that thing that you have when there's a wedding in the house or, you've got a promotion or whatever. But alcohol has become this part of your lifestyle, right? Like very French, where like you sip a glass of wine after you're done with a long day, or at least that's how I like to imagine my life to be. And I think the second big thing that's happened is, though it's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? There's super interesting stuff happening in the, alcohol complement space. There's Swami, there's literally new, there's, Bartisans, which is a base camp brand. There's a bunch of really cool, brands coming up in the mixer space. Obviously, the parallel to this is that restaurants and bars have started acknowledging cocktails, bartenders, which is, like a 3-4 year old, sort of movement. So I think it's really interesting. It's a very like rising tide lifts all boats, and all general trends are, working towards making alcohol consumption more lifestyle as opposed to, occasion.
Yeah. And that's all right. And I think what's also interesting is that you suddenly have people who've discovered options. I think for the longest time in India, you would always look at like, if there was beer, people would think of Kingfisher, right, for the longest time. And obviously now that whole space is opened up. I was just looking at some data and it said that the craft beer industry is one of the fastest growing industries, right? It kind of took over 2 to 3% of the country's beer market share. Obviously, the largest part is strong beer. India still drinks a lot of strong beer because you kind of have that drink, get it done with and move on. But the fact that it's gone to 2 to 3% for something that's called craft, there's a lot to say with that. And I think one of the best trends though is that alcohol traditionally always been marketed to men only. Now, I think the women consumers really kind of come up. It's made, in a way, we're looking at this whole space as being a lot more premium as well. So I think that's also changed how it's being marketed, how it's being sold. You mentioned mixers, and that's a really interesting category. I actually have had the founder and CEO of Jimmy's Cocktails on advertising list at some time back, and he had an interesting data point. Yeah, and he had an interesting data point. He said that while we talk about gin and everything else, and that's looking at a premium segment, a large part of the country wants to make cocktails at home, and he's seen the most amount of growth in tier 2 and tier 3 cities because they want to have a cocktail at home, and he's been able to give them that. And in that sense, he's seeing a trend of people wanting to have a scotch and soda, which was generally in almost an Indian drink in that sense. You're moving on from that to being this. And one of the big pushes there has been the fact that the women consumers have actually come into it. Millennials have changed it. Yeah. And mixers is a whole different world. I think there's so much to talk about with mixers over there.
Yeah, 100%. And even with mixers, it's interesting how every company is figuring out their own sort of niche, right? And also their own form. So, for example, you've got Jimmy's Cocktail, which is, more like concentrate, not concentrate. It's like, it's like in a liquid form that you need to add ice and your alcohol to. You've got something like Bartisans, which is in a concentrate form. It's like Monin, which is that syrup, right? So it's almost like adding a syrup to your, generally how you'd consume your drink. There are a couple of other companies that are doing putting, mixers in your powder form, so it's kind of like having Tang. And I think one part of it is obviously mixers is a culmination of investments that a lot of large alcohol companies have been making in India for the past 4 to 5 years, which is cocktails.
Yeah.
And I think the big unlocker in this whole, especially in the spirit space, right, in your like white spirit space, the unlocker has come because the Indian customers now become sensitized about cocktails, right? I remember like fresh out of college, when you'd go out, you'd ask either for like a beer or like some sasti vodka with Coke in it, right? But now look at what social has been able to do with, making LIIT like the it drink of a 23-year-old, the reason why half of Delhi is hungover on a Saturday morning. But basically, I think this education of this customer in helping this customer understand that there are so many different occasions and ways in which alcohol can be consumed. And it's been a 5-year investment, man. This isn't something that's happened overnight.
An interesting piece. So if you're looking at the West and a lot of these trends you can kind of spot is that people are consuming a lot of low alcohol or no alcohol drinks.
Correct.
Like I've always enjoyed my beer, but I've actually tried a bunch of no alcohol beers and I didn't mind them as much as I thought I actually would. And so that's actually been interesting to look at. But what's also interesting is seeing players like a Swami, who we mentioned earlier, who are launching no alcohol. They call it sober drinks, which you can have a gin and tonic or a rum and coke, which doesn't have any rum or any gin in it. And so it could be interesting to see how they kind of graduate from just mixers to almost standalone drinks that you would buy and keep at home. So that's really interesting. I got a bunch of other data as well. I've done my research on this episode because I was sitting back home. India is not only one of the fastest growing markets for alcoholic beverages, but it's also expected to grow at a CAGR, compound annual growth rate, of 6.8% between 2020 and 2023. And it's just going to, I think the growth is there, opportunity is there, because the more you're going outside of cities, you're seeing people want that option because people are traveled now. I think people also been stuck at home long enough that they want to have a drink available at home if they want to have it. So people are going to move towards higher brands, more premium brands as well, want to try more options. So it's the road ahead is going to be great for the alcohol industry.
Yeah, I do think this industry though is like riddled with regulations, which is why even, you don't see too many, typical VC sort of cut checks for these companies. Obviously, Sula was one that, invested heavily in building up wine as a market. There's a Bira that's done its, Shindig, Bira and Kingfisher that have done their thing with beer. But the problem with this space is there is just so much regulation. There are so many laws and rules that change on the regular. It's also not necessarily the cleanest industry to operate in. I mean, advertising is close to impossible. You and I both know because we've worked through our work. We worked with a lot of Alco-Bev brands and Alco-Bev accounts. But I think the biggest challenge with this space continues to be just the amount of regulation, that one can face if they choose to venture out within this space. But I, for one, I'm just generally very happy about tequila being taken seriously, in the form of agave or whatever else. But I'm bullish on this tequila rage, which I hope will be the gin and tonic of 2022.
Likewise. And what else are you bullish on? What's your next quick dive? What do you call it? Quick dive? Shortcut?
Shortcut, whatever we're calling it, yes.
Shortcut.
I think, obviously alcohol sort of rising out of nowhere is one, but I want to call out to, an industry that's kind of been on the down low for the past couple of years actually, which is fashion. And the reason why I say fashion has been on the down low isn't because it hasn't been growing from a e-commerce perspective. Obviously, we've seen brands like Uniqlo, enter India. There's through Reliance brands, there's, Kolhan, Cult Kaya, many other brands that have sort of, found their way, to Indian audiences. So you're seeing that premiumization of the customer happen. But the reason why I'm saying fashion's been on like a bit of a back burner is, I think, unfortunately, thanks to Flipkart, Amazon and Myntra, there was a lot of commoditization of fashion. So, everything became very like sasta tikau with not enough focus on, brand building. In fact, whether it's the likes of W, Biba, to some extent like Roadster perhaps, those are the last couple of names of Indian fashion brands that have really caught on, right? And obviously more recently there's been growth of like Bewakoof and Soul Store and a couple of these, other sort of like t-shirt and fast fashion kind of brands. But I think what's really interesting is fashion has finally sort of found its way back or seems to be finding its way back with brand building within the space coming back. And brand building is happening in myriad different ways, right? And we'll talk about Shein in just a bit, because the CEO of Myntra, the ex-CEO of Myntra who quit a couple of months ago, he's raising money for his new venture, which is supposed to be in the customer to manufacturing space. So listeners, for those of you who, aren't familiar, please check out this, article by Packy McCormick on Shein, which just helps you understand how Shein functions. But Shein's, Shein's moat is the software that they've, put in place, which just enables them to manufacture at a much more, sort of like rapid pace. So in the fashion world, there's this whole movement away from like marketplaces and this, that, and the other, to being more manufacturer to consumer. So not reseller, but like, manufacturer to consumer, where you take proprietary insights, figure out what is it that consumers want, but just develop it at super, super, super fast speeds. So apparently he's sort of, tinkering around with this idea. Obviously, we've seen Mensa really triple down on fashion brands. They recently announced an acquisition of their 15th brand, which is a leather handbags brand, but all of their bets so far seem to have been, in the fashion space. Also, private labels have come up like never before, right? You're seeing Nykaa take fashion much more seriously. I don't know if you've seen, but they've been advertising 20 Dresses, which is their, they acquired this brand a couple of years ago, but they seem to be spending much more money on that. They also launched their own 2 private labels within fashion. I think one was called Gajra Gang, which is this like...
That's a nice name.
Really, I found the name terrible, but in any case...
You'll remember it, is the way, what I mean by that. I think there's something about, say, Gajra Gang. I would remember that name. The Gully Gang, Gajra Gang. Anyway, I will not interrupt you in the middle of this.
Sounds a little brothel-esque, but okay. And they also launched, a Naked by Nykaa, which was their shapewear brand, like their, like Skims version, competitor, whatever else. And Flipkart also seems to really be doubling down on fashion. So Kalyan Krishnamurthy, who, did I get his last name right? Please say I got his last name right. KK from Flipkart. The CEO of Flipkart, he recently spoke about Flipkart's strategy, and obviously one area of focus for them is grocery, but another big area of focus for them is their Meesho competitor, which is Shopsy. And Shopsy's key category is fashion. And again, like obviously Shopsy plays in the general realm of like, super cheap, sasta, tikao, fast moving fashion, but basically lots happening within fashion, where fashion seems to be, almost like resurrecting itself, with innovations happening on the technology and distribution front, as well as innovations happening on the, manufacturing front. So what's your take, man? Any cool fashion brands that have caught your eye in the past couple of years, which are noteworthy?
I've been a long time March Tea fan. March Tea has always been a brand I've gone to just for generally the quality and everything else. I'm also seeing a lot of brands coming up who are focusing on what's called slow fashion, which is almost the opposite of what Shein, etc. kind of stand for. So you had your Bombay shirt company come in. You also got Andaman.
The Summer House.
Pronounce them right. A bunch of others, right? I think it's interesting where you've almost built out multiple categories now. I think especially on the guys side of things, I'm finding a lot more options than I ever did. Because I'm a self-confessed shopaholic. I buy too many things to wear, but end up sitting in the same shorts. But what's been interesting for me is to see how people are kind of building products. They're not just building brands saying, okay, let me just do what everybody else is doing. Soul Story is a great example of how someone's really been able to evolve from just a merch perspective and realizing that actually being able to manufacture, just plain and solids and stuff, has actually been able to build their business a lot more, right? And they're also going back to retail. They're actually going towards retail and doing all of that. So it's been interesting to see how what were traditionally D2C brands and not really in retail, moving towards retail as an opportunity. But more than anything else, I think that the consumer has changed. I think that's been my biggest thing over here, is that if you go to a store today to buy clothes, oftentimes I have found that experience to be far more tedious than if I just buy something off an app or buy something off a website. I feel the consumers change. We enjoy the fact, and we've gotten used to the fact we can order something, it will come home, we'll try it on. If it fits, we'll keep it, others will return it. That process has almost become, we have to thank Flipkart and Myntra for that, just kind of bringing that into how we function. But I feel that's been the big change, is that the consumers really changed and we want options. We want to try things out, and we're okay to, kind of stick to a brand, but also okay to shop around. And that's been the most interesting part about this space.
I don't know if the consumers changed. I think actually what happened in the middle was this almost like bastardization of fashion, right? Where like everything just came down to, what is a discount? Because if you look at Fashion 1.0, which was primarily led by Myntra, was about bringing branded brands on the internet and then, using cheapness as a shtick to get, products to customers. And I think in that, a lot of what happened, at least, my sort of understanding of the space was everything just became very me too. Like it was very different. It was very difficult to tell the difference in between one brand or the other. Like even today, if you open Myntra and if you, do a quick search of women's kurtis, everything looks the same, man. Like everything will have gold foil print, something else will have like a block print. I think what's exciting now for me is just also deeper interest in design. And again, like you said, design, aesthetics, taste, all of that has been brought together fairly well, specifically by these like Instagram brands. So, you alluded to quite a few, like March Tea has done a really good job of almost positioning like solids as a way of life, right? So solids being your black, white, gray, blue, whatever t-shirt, wear it with a pair of pants and, you're out the door. The Summer House, which again is a slow fashion brand, has, focused a lot on like more Indian textiles outside of just block print. So they've done interesting work with like cross stitch, tie dye, etc., etc. You've also got brands like the Loom, Mulmul. So a lot of really interesting stuff has happened in the Indian wear, festive wear side. But it's really awesome to see people take design seriously. And irrespective of my opinion of Gajra Gang's name, if you look at their clothes, you'll see that, right? You'll see how like design first, the selection, the edit, and the curation is. So I think within fashion, it's awesome to see a design first lens versus like a price discount, cheapest, fastest, quickest, because fashion shouldn't be that. Fashion shouldn't be, there is no need for you to buy the 600 t-shirt that you own. So your reason to buy it needs to be more than just like, the dopamine that you get by adding to cart and checking out. The dopamine for a category like fashion is better, done through a design, etc. Beyond that, time to take a quick break and we will be back with our deep dive, which will be on all things House of Brands and what's going on over there. Another favorite topic of ours. We'll be back.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
get accustomed to womanhood,
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
might get to wifehood,
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood,
earn a livelihood,
change the neighborhood,
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
and me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudil station, and hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Ladies and gents, we are back with our deep dive, which is going to be on Varun's favorite company, the GoodGlamm Group. But very seriously, we're going to kick off. This segment is going to be on House of Brands and all that's going on there. But let's begin our Aarti. Varun, tell us about the GoodGlamm Group and what are they housing, branding now?
So GoodGlamm Group has created this new entity called the Good Creator Co. They brought together 4 units which they've acquired. There's Plixo, there's Winkle, there's Viduli, and there's Miss Malini. And so it's an interesting combination of 4 really different companies in the same space and how they're going to really work together. I really want to see how this works though. I really want to see how all this kind of comes together, but I feel it also shows that they're really doubling down on using creators in this entire media pipeline to be able to kind of send their products through. Obviously, social commerce and everything else is going to be a big play for them as well. But yes, that's what's happening with GoodGlamm this week.
And I think this is what like confuses me about their strategy because, if you, and to be honest, I think they end up getting oxygen for like the most trivial things that they're doing, right? So I don't know if you saw, but they've made actually a couple of pretty awesome hires from Reckitt Benckiser, HUL and the likes to, sort of focus on their distribution of their products. They also have been in the news for, further consumer brand acquisitions that they may end up making. I saw on LinkedIn somewhere apparently they're hiring for some international sales development, biz dev, person, and maybe there's some angle over there of taking some of the GoodGlamm Group's products, out of the country. But I think what's like fascinating in a like intriguing, but like, what the hell is going on over here way is just the amount of oxygen given to all of these, quote unquote, other things that GoodGlamm is doing. And the reason why I call them other things isn't because I'm undermining the importance that, content, influencers, etc. can play, especially in a category like beauty. I think I am not fully understanding why is the magnitude of that as necessary as it is, like you said, like I totally get, and I think it's super smart to have a content lens within your business. And that's why when that PopXO acquisition happened, totally made sense, right? When even one of the influencer acquisition, in fact, PopXO had that Plixo thingamajig, which is their, influencer wing, even that totally made sense. But going on with this, like, I am building house of brands and I'm also parallelly building house of influencer managers and I'm also parallelly building house of content platforms. It just seems like it's a lot happening at the same time. And I don't know how much of it is, just like PR shit where some news is getting picked up more than the other. I don't know. I think what I'm not being able to understand is like, what is the moat over here? Because you're, as a beauty brand builder, right? Your moat somewhere has to be in your supply chain. It also has to be in your branding. It has to be in your ability to get customer insights. And maybe that's where some of these plays are coming in. But long term, their business model is going to be an e-commerce business model, right? It's going to be, I will sell products to customers. It's not going to be, I'm going to use, the Good Creator Group to generate ad revenue for my top line, bottom line, whatever, because, that just seems a little incoherent with the rest of their strategy. So again, too early to say anything, but I think what would be interesting to keep an eye out on is how does all of this really unfold into creating a moat for the GoodGlamm group with respect to their focus on becoming a HUL, Reckitt Benckiser, whatever in the digital era.
I think what's also really interesting to think about, right? And I'm just running through the Good Creator Co. website and how they've positioned each of these 4 brands. I think Miss Malini is obviously celebs and macro creators and talent management. I think Plixo is obviously helping 250,000 signed up creators grow and monetize. Obviously, creator monetization there. Winkle, they're saying it's full stack tech for creators and brands. And Viduli is obviously a data stack for advertisers and everything else. Now, the thing here is when you look at these 4 breakdowns, and there's a learning here. Right? There's a learning here when you look at how advertising agencies and networks are having to kind of evolve, is that instead of creating one, having these 4 different brands, these are all functions. So if you look at the advertising industry and how it's evolving, you're seeing the agency brand names kind of blend out a little bit, and it's saying, okay, who's doing the data stack for advertisers? Who's doing the tech stack for monetization? So I think the branding is one thing, but if you sell the functionality a lot more, I think this is what GoodGlamm Group has in terms of functionality rather than selling the brand names.
The client is still GoodGlamm's brands, right?
Exactly.
But that's the question mark, which is like, it's like you have an agency within an agent. You know what I mean? Like, but in any case, I think it's premature for any of us to pass an opinion, especially me, on whether, things will go the right way or not. I want to switch gears out of the GoodGlamm group for just a bit to talk about the other super interesting house of brands. So ladies and gents, when we think of house of brands, the typical names come up, but there's obviously this new name that's coming up, fairly frequently now, which is Cure Foods, which is, run by a former Flipkart exec who was co-founders with Mukesh Bansal on Cult, Ankit Nagori, and he, runs Cure Foods, which essentially has made a bunch of acquisitions. They made 5 acquisitions, in fact, recently. They bought Juno's Pizza in Mumbai, Nomad's Pizza in Delhi, which is divine, by the way. There's also Bangalore-based cupcake brand called Cupcake Noggins, and they have like this, Cake Zone, which is their app focused only on desserts, but they've literally built out a portfolio of 20 brands which are, in the cloud kitchen-ish space, almost coming up as a competitor to Rebel Foods. In fact, doing what Rebel Foods took a decade around to do in a very, very short period of time, because they've obviously been able to raise around a lot of money and consolidate these brands. But interesting to see house of brands happen even outside of, the more typical examples that we end up seeing on the internet. So are you ordering from any of Cure Foods' brands, and what's your take on food also going the house of brands route?
I actually tried a bunch of these. So weirdly, I have a great Fasos story. Is the fact that when I was in college in Pune, Fasos at that point in time, it's a great thing is that these guys actually used to just run Fasos, and it was a couple of 2 units where all of us in college would survive on Fasos. Kind of go back to that. But a lot of these I've tried out, and I think it's also because we've come to the point where a lot of what we order is of these apps, right? We don't know which one's a cloud kitchen and we don't know which one is actually a restaurant. I feel just the quality of some of these cloud kitchens has actually gone up a lot.
Yep.
I haven't been a big fan of Bezos biryani, but I'm a bit of a biryani snob, so I'm not going to put that against them. But it's been interesting to see this entire scale happening out. You're seeing a lot of action. I think cloud kitchens is where there's a ton of action happening. Also because Interestingly, you're getting flavors you could never be able to get if you had to also run a restaurant. So some things which didn't make sense as a restaurant or as an actual, physical space is now great to kind of have as a cloud kitchen because people will still buy it.
I think the thing that makes cloud kitchens interesting is I wonder what their direct-to-consumer play will be, because, for instance, with a lot of these other house of brand plays, right, there is an opportunity to build a significant D2C business, right? Whether it's fashion brands or it's beauty brands or even some of these interesting FMCG brands that are coming up and are sort of rolling into the house of brands play. What's interesting about Cure Foods is it's almost like Thrasio of Zomato plus Swiggy. And in an interview with Ankit recently with Nentara Rai, what was interesting was Amazon apparently seems to also be making a play within this food delivery space. He mentioned how Amazon's already contributing to, significant sort of percentage of their overall turnover. But I think the thing that makes the space interesting and a little tricky is just the amount you count on aggregators. And the amount you count on a Swiggy or a Zomato or, an Amazon or whoever else to drive business for you. And to date, I can't think of a single example of a scaled up D2C food delivery play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a single restaurant or like a chain of restaurants or a chain of cloud kitchens, in fact, that have been able to pull enough demand, to its like app or website or whatever else and make orders happen from there. And given that the delivery game, specifically the food delivery game, in any case is a low ASP, low margin kind of business where delivery costs end up eating up, into a lot of the profitability that you have. I wonder how, they're thinking of making at least some part of their D2C play considerable enough, especially when even, within delivery, there's so much competition coming up.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, right? Because you look at the entire funnel, like you said, about how they can actually build control over there. We're seeing a lot of like if you look at something like a Goila's butter chicken, right? I'm just talking like away from this. Let's say an individual brand has done really well. I know for a fact that as much as he might be pushing for people to order from his own site and his own destination, people are going to go to a Swiggy and a Zomato. And I think you're seeing a lot of people having that. And I remember talking to Saransh, and he mentioned that this is the one thing that the move away from aggregators, just from a mindset perspective, is a lot tougher for people. So the tendency is to open a Zomato or a Swiggy and not necessarily go to a separate website. So it's going to be interesting to see how you can kind of pull people away from that. I don't know if there's an answer to that. I think we'll always go there. So how do you make this work in the long term where you aren't kind of held to whatever they decide to do?
Yeah, and segueing into another category, which is like literally brands buying other brands to bake into their house of brands, sort of play. You're obviously seeing a lot of that happen even outside of just the, Thrasios of the world. You're seeing brands like Mama Earth, which have, obviously been in conversation with multiple different brands to see what can be figured out over there. They recently picked up, Mompresso. There's Flipkart and Myntra. I think all of us forget that Flipkart, Myntra, Amazon are the OGs house of brands, right? And I think the thing that makes their model so interesting is that they're sitting on proprietary data. So if I am Myntra, I am sitting on proprietary data of what is it that my customers want, what are customer trends. And not only do I have the data, I also have the distribution engine to take my product to, customers based on exactly what their, needs, requirements, etc., are. I think, the question that I have in my head is you're seeing the world and its mother raise money and ridiculous amounts of money, not just India, but even in the US, by pitching this whole house of brand spiel, right? In fact, I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning, and Harry's, which is that, men's shaving, etc., company, they were supposed to IPO, pulled back on their plans of IPO, raised $150 million only to become a house of brands, and juxtapose that to, for example, something like a Warby Parker or an Allbirds who IPO'd on the back of a single brand, right? Yeah. It's not like Warby Parker has like 30 other brands within its portfolio. So I think this goes back to, the fundamental question of what are the categories that actually require house of brand strategy and where does that strategy make sense? You've got Lenskart, which obviously has multiple brands within its portfolio, most of which, owned by it. But Lenskart is an example of a brand that's almost been built out as a destination, that's almost been built out as a brand. So you don't even say, I'm going to buy Prada ki sunglasses on Lenskart. Hypothetically speaking, you literally just say, oh, I bought these on Lenskart, right? Which is what Warby Parker was able to do. And then, of course, you've got Allbirds, where, it's not like Allbirds has acquired 10 other shoe brands. They've been able to build a fairly, significant business by themselves. I think the two questions that I have, which I'm hoping we get answers to over the course course of this year as most of these brands' strategy and GTM plays out is, one, what about your strategy makes what your moat is and what your defense is very, very apparent. For example, for Mensa, which has been buying fashion brands left, right and center, are they tripling down on supply chain? And are they solving supply chain issues for fashion brands? Because that genuinely is a big problem for emerging brands, right? Everything from inventory prediction. So for example, is a moat your technology stack like it is for Shein, which we discussed earlier? Or is your moat maybe your distribution and your branding stack, which maybe is a play that, GoodGlamm's playing through its bets on all of these, content, influencer, etc. platforms. But I hope one thing that becomes more clear is, are you becoming a house of brands only because you have credentials and you have the ability to raise a shit ton of money from VCs? Or are you becoming a house of brands because somewhere within your strategy, it is possible for you to create a single unifier or a single moat that actually brings all of these brands together and that each of these brands can leverage your moat off of? Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I feel that's the right way to do it, because there'll be a lot of people who will raise a lot of money and kind of say, okay, this is, because house of brands is what everyone's talking about, right? The tendency to even take if I was today kind of start a D2C brand, the tendency is for me to start thinking about, okay, should I just make it a house of brands? Because that seems to be what is getting funded right now. But you fundamentally don't have that layer of what builds your, to use your phrase, what builds your moat. I think you're going to over time kind of struggle, because if that's almost like a foundation, right? That's what your whole thing is built on. So you build multiple offshoots of it. What I think would be interesting though, and I don't know if that's, and I'd love your perspective on it, is a moat also what you stand for? In many ways, let's say if somebody says, okay, what we stand for across all the brands we have is a certain set of things, values. Obviously, organization and ops is one part. But also there's a fundamental mindset or a thought process behind all of it. Do you think that makes sense as well? Is that a way to look at it? Do you think that will, because I've thought about that a little bit, because people are valuing what a brand stands for. So does this come into play as well?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And my sort of take on it is, you need to go back to jobs to be done, right? Consumers, like for a consumer. So for example, and I think this is what Shein has gotten down to the T, where they've said that our job to be done is bringing you the trendiest fashion faster than any person on this planet can, right? And for them, the value, quote unquote, is trend and, TikTok trends or Instagram trends or whatever rubbish. But the moat is in that ability to, go from design to manufacturing to website in like record time, right? So I think values is like, cool shit to say, but at the end of the day, your value needs to tie in very closely and vice versa. Your value needs to tie in very closely to what is it that your differentiator is going to be. And also the thing that you think is your differentiator, is that actually a differentiator for your category? Yeah. And look at something like IKEA, right? Like IKEA doesn't have to be a house of brands because
your brand is so strong you can have,
Exactly, right? The brand is strong enough where the brand can literally sell everything under the sun. And I remember we'd spoken about this earlier, but I think that's where like there's a really interesting difference in between GoodGlamm and Sugar Cosmetics, right? Where Sugar has done such a stellar job of like just being razor sharp focused on that one brand. I don't know how long it's going to last for. And then, on the other end, you've got like GoodGlamm that's just like buying shit up left, right and center, buying a lot of really interesting companies up left, right and center. But I think it goes back to like, what is a job to be done for a customer and what is the best way in which I can do that job? And am I building something proprietary, whether it's through capital access, supply chain, delivery, whatever, which actually warrants the use case of a house of brands versus, versus otherwise. I don't know. That's the way I think about it.
Just look at Unilever, right? As much as you want to kind of turn around and say that, this is how new age brands are built, look at a Unilever, take a bunch of that stuff out of their playbook. I think there's a lot to learn from there. Look at a Unilever, look at a P&G. There's so much to learn from these companies just in terms of how you can do that.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that's common across all of these companies is their moat has always been distribution. Their moat has always been how do you get products in like niftier ways out to customers wherever customers are. And we guys can keep talking about this for time immemorial, given this whole world of CPG and this, that and the other is my jam. But let's take a quick break and then be back with our recommendations for the week.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Okay, welcome back to the last segment of the show where we give recommendations and we are like, please watch, please listen, please read. But there's a lot of fun stuff. So I'm going to let you give your recommendations first and then I will get into mine.
So my recommendation is, and actually this ties in with the little Ashneer Grover debacle that happened. And there's a reason why I didn't say anything, because I heard this excellent podcast recently. It's called Honestly with Barry Weiss. And there's a very specific episode, which is called The Real Story of the Central Park Karen. I don't know if you remember this, Vidi, but like, I think last year or the year before last, there was this whole episode where, like a white female called the cops on an African-American gentleman in Central Park, and she lost her job. She was kicked out of, her role at
Karen.
Yeah, and her name was Amy Cooper, and she basically became like the internet Karen, right? This episode is excellent because, and like, spoiler alert, you basically find out that the guy, Christian Cooper, who was at the receiving end of, who obviously was like the knight in shining armor in all of this, you find out so much information about how he was the instigator. He's gotten into a lot of trouble in the past in Central Park for picking fights with, dog owners and doing this whole shtick that he did. And it just, throws light on the fact that there are so many sides to a story and you can't cancel someone based on, like one excerpt that was thrown on the internet because you don't know what happened before and after. And when you hear the podcast, you kind of feel like a jackass for, favoring Christian Cooper without really hearing what Amy Cooper had to say. And it's very nicely done. It's run by Barry Weiss, is a journalist, and she's written a lot of articles for The Atlantic and all, but excellent episode on not jumping to conclusions. Please don't believe anything and everything that you see on the internet. That said, of course, if Ashneer was as rude as he was to that Kotak Mahindra, employee, not cool at all, absolutely horrendous behavior, but just, don't like jump on clickbait. So hear that episode, guys. I think it's an excellent episode. Vidi, what about you?
I don't know if you've spoken about this. Have you seen Don't Look Up?
Yes. What a movie. What a movie. What a movie.
I think everybody should watch it. But the one thing which everyone should kind of think about is, and I was watching an interview of Adam McKay who made it, and he said that this is his way of showing the climate crisis. The comet or the meteor in the movie is almost like showing a visual representation of the climate crisis coming towards us. I don't know if enough people will get that. So I want to just say, watch the movie, but imagine that thing coming towards the earth as the climate crisis and what's been going on. There's a middle part, which I felt was a little stretched, but there's a line in the end, which I will not spoil for people, but that line hit so hard that I've had a screenshot, which I look at quite often towards the end, which DiCaprio says. But what a great movie. What a great movie to watch. So many emotions at the end of it.
And also Jonah Hill. Oh my God. Jonah Hill. He is amazing. Superbad is my favorite movie of all time. And Jonah Hill in this movie is Vahtaj.
My favorite movie of all time is Tridev. It has not changed.
What is that?
Please watch Tridev. Paap se dharti pati, adharm se asman. I will not say the rest of it. My Hindi is terrible. But yes, watch Don't Look Up. And actually something else which I thought was a really fun piece to look at is look for a YouTuber called Johnny Harris. Anybody who's interested in kind of looking at socio-political stuff, trying to understand what's happening across the world. This guy used to work for Vox, do some deep investigative stuff, and he's got a fabulous YouTube channel. He talks about, like, his content is exactly how news content should be. So check out Johnny Harris on YouTube now. Great channel to look into. And that's it for my recommendations.
Double whammy.
Yes.
Double whammy. And that's it for the show, guys. That is it for the show. Thank you to everyone who's giving us love on Twitter, by the way.
Lots of love.
We really appreciate it. Oh, apparently I'm like bold and badass.
Yes, I saw that.
Oh my God. No, but thank you so much for listening in, and have a good rest of the week, guys. You have a good week too, man. Varun, I hope second week of Jan isn't as disastrous as the first week has been.
I'll be back in my usual spot by the next episode, so I'll see you then.
Yes, in the meanwhile, enjoy being in Mummy ke haath.
Toodles.
Ma poodles.
Toodles.
Bye, guys.
Toodles, bye.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Episode 100! We've hit the 100th episode on Storytellers and Storytellers with Vineet Kanabar. Join us to take a look back at some of the best episodes so far. On Cyrus Says, Anushka Iyer, founder of Wiggles, tells Cyrus all about her pet care company. They chat about their mutual love for pets and how to best care from them. On The Habit Coach, Ashton learns 3 habits to better your handwriting from graphologist Imran Beg. On Fin Talks at Bob World, Akhil Handa talks to Gurjot Pal Singh. He's the CEO of Tide In. They discuss its digital banking services. In a new series called Ek Sawal Kai Jawab, the Pulyabazi hosts analyze why the number of government companies is increasing rapidly. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. You can have a list of all of our shows at ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.